This is the Bryan Hyde Show.
Well, hello there and welcome to the show. All right, I'm going to confess I am sneezing my head off. The smoke situation in southern Idaho has worsened, and it's it's taking its toll. So, if you don't mind me sounding like I'm talking through my nose and sneezing on occasion and possibly sniffling, please bear with me, and we'll get through this thing together. Anyway, welcome to the show. If you're a first-time listener, you're probably wondering, all right, what am I in for here? Let me just tell you this. I'm not smart. I'm not good looking. I'm not rich. I'm not famous. Frankly, I don't have a whole lot going for me other than I really love the truth. And in fact, on top of the truth, I love freedom. And for the last 30 years, I have had the privilege of speaking out in defense of liberty, personal freedom, the principles and practices that, in my opinion, make life worthwhile. In other words, without liberty, without freedom, really, I don't think it's possible to enjoy happiness, authentic happiness. So to that end, I speak out as best I can to encourage people, not so much to march in tune with me on this political thing, to beat a particular political drum, but to think as clearly and independently as you can. Because we are in a time where there's a lot of chaos, much of it politically originating from the political, realm. But there's also a lot of disinformation, misinformation, deception, and, obscuring of the truth. So it's hard to know what's going on. And when I say know what's going on, I don't just mean, hey, have you heard the latest news from a faraway place that has nothing to do with you, that nonetheless is being reported in such a way as to make you fearful or angry or just anxious? So my approach isn't so much, let's bury our heads in the sand and let's, just ignore everything outside of our immediate orbit, but rather to choose more carefully, more deliberately, what we give our attention to, lest we miss some of the things that actually do matter more. And more importantly, lest we miss out on some of the opportunities to use our influence in ways that actually move the needle in the right direction. I know it's an election year, and what I'm about to say is going to be considered heresy to a lot of people, but I just hate to see people get so wrapped around the axle over the idea of, well, we got to win in November. It's all about winning, and in fact, that over the course of the last 30 years or so, I've really been paying close attention for the last 32 years, but for the last 30 years especially, it seems like every election becomes just a little bit more strident, just a little bit more about how can we control, or worse, how can we punish those who disagree with us ideologically? And of course, the other side is saying that too. Each side is more concerned with, you must do unto others before they can do unto you. It's kind of a perversion of the golden rule. And so the rhetoric becomes much more volatile. It becomes much more heated. You hear people starting to talk about things like, oh, yeah, we should be putting these people in camps. We should be, sending them off for re-education, or maybe we ought to just, separate ourselves. And by the way, I would lean much more towards a national divorce than, a Balkans type conflict, for obvious reasons. Let us go our ways peacefully. But I think there are way too many people who aren't able to let other people live. They just have that desire to control. By the way, it's not just the left. It's, there are people on the right who feel that way too. You want to test it out? Here's how you do it. Say the word secession. And people on the right suddenly will summon their inner Abraham Lincoln. You can't do that. Try to leave me and I'll kill you. So, what can we do? All right. Well, this is the meat of what this program is about. It turns out there's a lot that we can do. But it starts with reconciling our own character and who we are, and basically knowing ourselves and having certainty about who we are and what we stand for, as opposed to simply, well, I know I'm against this, and I know I don't like them, and they deserve to be punished, which is what, again, most of today's politics is kind of predicated on. It's the idea that we must punish those who disagree with us. I'm confident of this. Whatever happens come November, our situation and the trajectory that we are on as a nation, as a society, is really not going to be altered that much. How could I make a prediction like that? Well, because just for sake of argument, Ron Paul actually pointed this out the other day. Because the major candidates, yes, even Trump and Kamala Harris, they're not talking about the incredible debt bomb that is ticking and making funny sounds. They're campaigning on other issues. But government spending is out of control, and when the bubble pops, which it will at some point, it is going to have some very heavy economic repercussions, possibly the heaviest that any of us have ever seen in our lives. I don't tell you that to scare you. I'm trying to be a realist here. I'm just saying it's not the kind of situation that can go on in perpetuity. It's impossible. This is one of those cases where, is it better to humble yourself, or is it better to be compelled to be humble? Well, as it pertains to our economic health, I'm pretty certain that the people who are in charge, or at least the people holding the reins of power, are not the type who are capable of humbling themselves. Their hubris is so strong and so absolute. They really believe we can pull this off. We're different. We're better. And they're going to learn some hard lessons. And the sad thing is they're going to take the rest of us along for a ride. So let's talk about some of the things that we can do. And for this, I want to start with a sense of community. One of the things that gives me a sense of confidence, not a sense of, we're going to avoid any problems if there's major economic upheaval or a societal breakdown of some sort, or even just, unusually high amounts of political strife. Nope, we'll feel the pain, but I do love this about my community, and that is that there is a sense of community, a sense of, look, who we are the kind of people who can do difficult things. We can solve problems. We can take care of each other. By the way, that last one is a huge one. Because I'm not talking about we take care of each other by taxing the crud out of everybody and then redistributing all of that taxed goodness to everyone. It's more like we understand that people need to be able to make their own decisions as much as possible. But when we see a real need, it's so powerful when you live in a community that will actually rally around those who need help. So Walker Larson, writing for intellectualtakeout.org, asks the question, are American communities deteriorating? And he has some not so good news from the Pew Research Center, which recently surveyed people from 24 different countries, asking them whether they felt very or somewhat close to the people in their country and or people in their local community. Maybe you won't be surprised, but the United States fell dead last when it came to a sense of solidarity with countrymen. Only 66% of Americans said they feel close to others in their country, while the median for all other countries surveyed was 83%. Hungary, by the way, had the highest rates of this sense of national belonging, 93% reporting this kind of closeness. I know Viktor Orban, who's their president, gets a lot of flack. Why? He's not playing the game. He's not part of this rules-based international order, blah, blah, blah. He's also not participating in a lot of the woke garbage that our leaders are, which is really meant about imposing leftist values on as many people as possible. And look at that, 93% sense of national belonging in those surveyed in Hungary. Now, the sad thing is the U.S. didn't fare a whole lot better when it came to the strength of bonds in local communities. Only 54% of Americans said they feel close to people in their local area, giving our nation a second-to-last ranking, beating out South Korea by just 4%. Now, our sense of isolation varies across demographics. Walker Larson says, in general, young Americans feel more disconnected from fellow Americans than older Americans do. Perhaps because younger generations have grown up in a technologized world that's far more ideologically divided than their grandparents was. And there are also differences along party lines, with Republicans being more likely to feel bonded to their countrymen, that's at 75%, than Democrats, which came in at 60%. And the same pattern plays out when it comes to religion. 73% of U.S. adults with religious affiliation feel close to others, while only 51% of religiously unaffiliated adults do. So Walker Larson says the pattern seems clear. The more religious and conservative you are, the more likely that you feel fellowship with fellow Americans. By the way, it's interesting to note that Hungary, one of the most conservative countries in Europe, has the highest rates of solidarity and unity. So why would it be the case that more conservative religious folks are more connected to others? Well, Walker Larson says at intellectualtakeout.org, they have reported that embracing left-wing social justice ideology, those who embrace it, have lower rates of happiness and higher rates of anxiety and depression. He says, as I noted in that research that they've reported on before, the neo-Marxist influence on the modern left's ideology suffuses it with a preconception that society is unjust. And this belief in the inherent injustice of society leads to anxiety, anger, and sadness. At least that's his theory. Now, he says it's possible that similar reasons underpin the higher rates of isolation among Americans with liberal ideologies compared to those with conservative beliefs. Left-leaning politics increasingly operate on a worldview predicated on mechanisms of power, oppression, and victimhood. This is why, if you're talking to a dedicated leftist, political power is the single most important dynamic in any human interaction. They're concerned about things like intersectionality and, well, you only say that because you're speaking from a position of privilege and so forth, and here's some guilt to make sure that you have to do what I tell you to do, and it's very tiresome. Now, on the other hand, traditional conservative values are concerned with restoring and preserving connections, whether it's between husband and wife, parents and children, politics and morality, education and truth, culture and beauty, past and present. Walker Larson says, in fact, a decent definition of a traditional conservative would be one who wishes to conserve the connections and integrations of human life bestowed on us by our predecessors. Similarly, true religion encourages charity, sacrifice, and solidarity among its practitioners. So it comes as no surprise that conservative and religious people feel more united. Now, all that said, he asks, why might Americans in general feel less connected to one another than people from other nations? And he says the answer may lie in our famous American individualism, along with the historical contingencies of our nation's development. America is, relatively speaking, a young country, made up of a vast number of different cultures, traditions, and people. We don't have much for a single long-standing shared American culture, and what commonalities we did have are being broken down by increasing political polarization, as he suggested in the wake of the Trump assassination attempt. So our lack of solidarity may be for the same reason that, as Michael Pollan argues in The Omnivore's Dilemma, we struggle more than most countries with our eating habits. We're deeply multicultural and have not received a single set of customs, values, or heritage that everyone agrees upon. So he says our feelings of distance from our local communities can be traced to similar causes, with the additional ones of globalization and big agriculture, which tend to disrupt or destroy local cultures and communities. And Walker Larson says this lack of cultural, religious, and ideological unity naturally makes it harder to feel united as a people. Relationships are, at their most basic level, built upon common beliefs, shared experiences, collective goals, and this we seem to possess less than many other countries. Perhaps, however, he says rediscovering our shared values could once again bring unity, community, and fellowship among Americans. I think that's a very, very solid recommendation. So now the question is, okay, how do we do that? Okay, you ready for my simple answer? I'm a simple guy. I think it's found through serving the people around you. And there are multiple opportunities for service within your community. Okay, true story. I was talking with a friend last night, and he was telling me about a guy, this is a guy he knows in his church congregation, who is in his 80s. But he specifically had reached out saying, hey, I'm looking for opportunities to serve. And it could be something simple. As you know, do you know of someone who's needing some help in some way? Can I help, clean a church building? Can I help, with whatever? But get this, the reason that this elderly gentleman is reaching out is because he deals with anxiety. He's not the only one, by the way. It's not like, well, of course, when you're weak, you have to do that. No, we're all dealing with anxiety, but that is one of the healthiest ways to deal with it. And the upside is when you are serving your fellow people, your fellow community members, you are building bonds. I'm going to get a little bit religious on you here for a second. Do you want to come to love people, total strangers? And I mean really love them with like a, pure, charitable, Christ-like love? Find a way to serve them. It seems so counterintuitive, and it's not like, well, I better go find some poor downtrodden soul, who, is pitiful and needs my help so they can be my project. Nobody wants to be somebody else's project. Even the poor, pitiful, downtrodden soul that you think you may have spied over there in the gas station parking lot. But the opportunities are abundant. We have a community soup kitchen. And every so often, the opportunity comes up to come help, to serve food, to wash the dishes, and take out the trash and whatnot. And I know it sounds pretty mundane. Well, yeah, okay, but what does that really accomplish? Well, number one, it puts you in contact with people you otherwise probably would not meet. And it gives you a chance to really talk to them, acknowledge them, look them in the eye, and appreciate them for who they are. And as you are serving them, I don't know how to explain this. It's going to take somebody smarter than me. You do feel a love for them. I don't know how it works, but I'm telling you, that is the way that it works. So let's just expand that to, the broader vision. You don't have to go find a soup kitchen necessarily. But if you are living your life with an awareness for the people around you, and particularly if you notice something, this person appears to be struggling, and maybe they're carrying a heavy box out of the store, or they're having trouble getting up a flight of stairs. Take a moment of your precious time and go help them. And you don't have to stand around and wait for the accolades. Okay, well, do I take a small bow? What do I do here? Just go help them, smile at them, and go on your way. I don't care if you were feeling down before, it will give you an immediate lift. There's some kind of a reset that happens in our minds or in our hearts. Maybe it's a spiritual thing. I don't know. All I do know is it works. But the time that you spend building those ties within your community pay huge dividends when the community needs to come together. And suddenly, you're not just strangers. You are a known commodity to one another. Yes, warts and all. You're able to come together and really do great things. All right, 2 other quick articles I want to just touch on briefly. These are in today's show notes at thebryanhydeshow.com. Show notes for September 4th, 2024. Mark Zuckerberg's confession of how Facebook was used to suppress inconvenient facts and opinions. If that doesn't set off some alarms, I don't know what it would take to make people go, oh, that's serious. Because even taking the most moderate approach to that seems to have successfully helped manipulate public opinion prior to the 2020 election, particularly the suppression of the news about the Hunter Biden laptop, which it turns out was real and not a Russian fabrication, as the lying U.S. intelligence agencies told us. But the bigger question here is, Why did Mark Zuckerberg choose now to confess? And Jeffrey Tucker, who is one of those voices that I really find has a great deal of thoughtful content to offer, he examines that question. Why did he do this? Why did he choose now to say, yes, we were used at the behest of government officials to suppress inconvenient facts and opinions? Wonderful article. I hope you'll take the time to read it. Okay, the article of the day. This one's a little bit heavier. Some people are going to be like, that's a little bit much for me, but have you noticed how things have escalated in Ukraine? It's not good. Most of the Ukrainian government officials handed in their resignations yesterday. And the thing that's concerning about this is NATO has been working very hard. The globalists actually, through NATO, have been working very hard to push us into World War III before the November election can get here. Now, to their credit, so far, Russia hasn't taken the bait. But you should read what Brandon Smith has to say about those efforts. Why would the globalists want to kick off World War III? Because they need a massive distraction. People have caught on to their machinations, and most of us have made it clear I'm not going along with whatever it is you guys are telling me I have to do. Check it out. Again, it's in the show notes at thebryanhydeshow.com. Show notes for September 4th, 2024.
This is The Bryan Hyde Show.